Hey guys, Kev here, and I have an overview review to do for you. This is the Kizer Knives Clairvoyant. This is designed by Munko Knives. It is in S35 VN steel, titanium, marbled carbon furbin with a marbled carbon furbin pivot collar. You have a titanium backspacer. You have a plunge lock, aka the button lock, which is very nice. I believe, yeah, it's a steel button. Kind of looks titanium, so I was just gonna check, which don't think that would work. Although, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, titanium milled clip that I wish was reversible, but is not. And that is really the deal here. So some stuff to talk about on this one. I really dig this design. So I am not a long, slender knife guy, if you've ever noticed. I don't keep or really own these long, slender type knives. Like, you know, I kind of call them Sienkiewicz knives. Kind of reminds me of the ZTO. What are they? The 0450? No, wait, I had an 0450. That's the... It's slender, but it's not as long. This is the 0452. It's really long and kind of Persian-y. It kind of just reminds me of that. Not in any sense of like they're that similar, just an overall length, you know, slenderness, if that makes sense. This guy is rocking thumb studs, obviously, so your deployment options are thumb stud, thumb flick, you have a reverse flick, you obviously have the button lock. I've never actually tried a whip out move. Yeah, I'd have to have it tuned a little differently for that. I have the pivot pretty tight, and we'll talk about that. But you could do that, obviously, if you wanted to. You can also slow roll it out. And those are pretty much your options. You could probably, if you tried hard enough, and yeah, you could flick it off of there if you wanted to. We have a stonewash finish on this S35VN. It is ground extremely well by Kizer. Comes down to a nice thin edge. It cuts really, really well. I did some cut testing in a video you can watch. And I also cut some cardboard right before this video, actually, just to... it was like thin cardboard, like soda can boxes, you know, like a Coke box. Just because I was like, I want to cut some shit, you know. So I took it out, cut with that while I was testing the Giant Mouse Ace Atelier, which actually did really, really well in cutting. I enjoy this knife quite a bit. You know, there's some drawbacks to it being Italian made. But, you know, the overall product, I think, is actually quite good. As long as you get one that's, you know, properly QC'd and all that good stuff. But luckily, their customer service is really good. So, anyway, the Clairvoyant. So, let's talk about it. Aesthetically, again, it's not really my style, but this one caught my eye. The first moment that I saw it on Instagram... on a Kizer post, I was like, ooh, what is that? And I'll be honest, I actually thought it was a Sharif Manganis design. And I was like, ooh, Sharif got another design with Kizer. That's looking good. I saw the name and the button lock, and then I saw it was, they were tagging Munko Knives, and I was like, oh, cool, somebody else designed it. But it was unique, you know what I mean? And that's something I attribute with Sharif, is his designs tend to be very unique. Not everybody can do that. I mean, if you look at my designs with Colin, Divo knives, so CM Knife Designs and myself, you know, they're not like crazy original, I don't know how to say it without making it sound negative. You know, we design within a certain element. We like certain things, and, you know, that ends up making the knife look like, you know, a knife. Where there's other people like Elijah Isham and Arcane Design, Israel, and Sharif, who have a particular design language that really is unique to them. Very hard to explain that. I'm not saying that other people, including us, are, you know, regurgitating designs or copying stuff or anything, but the designs tend to be within a, you know, circle, let's say, right? Where these guys call it a box. These guys are outside the box, if that makes sense. And it's very hard to be outside the box and yet still have a very good functional knife. Because a lot of times, I will argue, Elijah Isham's designs, while very cool, unique, and outside the box, all the ones I've handled, except for the McKenna, and I think one other one, were not very functional. They weren't like good to use knives. They were really cool art pieces, essentially. Could they be used? Yes. But it wasn't like super comfortable and all that kind of jazz, right? Where, like I was just saying about our designs at Divo, you know, we almost design around being a good utilitarian knife, right? Like this is very comfortable to hold and use, and that basically makes it a little bit more run-of-the-mill. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's lackluster, but it's a little more run-of-the-mill compared to something like this. This is kind of an outlier a little bit. But anyway, I don't know if that made any sense. What I'm trying to say is this design is really cool and unique and yet very functional at the same time. And those are all positive things is what I'm trying to drive home here. Yeah. So the construction on this one has this screw right here, and that is holding in that inlay, and it is driving it into that liner. I actually am working on a button lock design that Kizer is doing, and they were trying to add this screw in this area, and I don't know if it's for the same reason, but basically what they were saying was to have the liner held in, they needed this screw here, and we're trying to work around it to get rid of it. But ours has nested liners. This is proud liners, so I don't know. I think it's just to hold in this inlay. I did not take this knife apart. I just did not feel the need to. I'm probably going to pass this guy around. I really like to spread the wealth when companies send me stuff. So Kizer sent me this to review along with some other knives, and I really appreciate that. And I like to return that kindness by passing them around so they get some more, you know, airtime from other channels. And, you know, and it kind of goes both ways because other channels want to check stuff out. And this is a cool knife that not everybody's going to be able to get their hands on. So, you know, I think it's always a good thing to pass them around. And that's what will be happening. And I just didn't feel like taking it apart. But I did mess with the pivot because it had a little bit of play. And so I was trying to get it to a spot where it did not have play. And it was centered. And it still had good action. What I ended up with was no play. Decent action. It's not just free falling, but if you let it get started, it will drop. And slightly off center. So in order to have it be perfectly centered, right, there has to be a little bit of play. And then it will really swing down on its own. Like you see here, I have to give it a little bit to get it to fall. So it kind of wants a little bit of play in there to be dialed, essentially. But I don't like play, so this is where we're at. And I Loctited it here. So if somebody wants to mess with it later, that's fine. But I'm fine with it this way. I don't mind. It's kind of, when you're fidgeting with a knife like this, it's kind of inherent for you to push the button and give a little jolt. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm just going like this and going, oh my God, it's not falling. I just give it a little toss and it, you know, it falls right down. And honestly, I kind of prefer it because it doesn't bounce back and forth off the stop. You know, that happens a lot with these button locks. They tend to bounce and I don't know. So I enjoy it the way it is. And yeah, so we talked about aesthetics. I really love this blade shape. It's what stands out the most. Well, I guess the whole silhouette does. This handle design really stands out. The button placement and the aesthetic of the button really looks good to me. It's one of the better looking button locks I've seen. It ends up being an eyesore a lot of times because it's kind of just an afterthought. Like, yeah, it needs a button because it's a button lock. But I always like it when, you know, people design around the button. They make a cool looking button or whatever, right? Like on our button lock design, we kind of have a cool shaped button. It kind of goes with the design, and that's kind of the idea. But this is another way to do it where it kind of blends in with the pivot and it's sort of symmetric. It just looks good, in my opinion. As for billboarding, we have the Kizer logo, S35EN up here in the corner, Munko knives over here, Clairvoyant over here, and a model number right here. As Kizer tends to do. I'll show you. Here's the Drop Bear, one of my favorites. Drop Bear LC200N Azo Kizer. Here we have the Sheepdog from Kizer. Kizer S35 model number, Sheepdog knives, another model number, XL. They just billboard, and it's unfortunate. I mean, they do try at least to keep it all in one area. You know, they don't also have it on the clip and then have it all over the place on the pivot or whatever. But I think they could tone this down a little bit. They could shrink their Kizer logo a little, right? They could maybe get rid of the model name. We don't need that on the knife. Shrink this down a little bit. There's things they could do. We don't need a model number on the blade. But, you know, maybe it makes it easy for them in assembly, or they just are proud of their work and they want to show it off. You know, that's fine. But they are a bit guilty of billboarding, and I feel like they don't get enough flack for it. We kind of let them go on it. I don't know why Kizer gets a pass. It's kind of like Microtech. People don't, you know, give them a ton of shit for that, but it's like the worst billboarding ever. So anyway, that is there. Ergonomics, it's really comfortable in hand. That's what stood out to me when I got it was, wow, this is actually really comfortable. Now, left-handed, I do feel this tip of the clip right here. You can see it's pretty pokey. And that's because if I hold it back here, my middle finger lands right on that corner, which is unfortunate. But luckily, we have this sort of choil, which I'm calling a choil, and that is where I will live if I'm going to use this knife. So, does it matter that I touch the clip back here? Not really, because if I use the knife, I will be up here. So, you know, if I really mess around or whatever, I can get my pinky to touch this, but it's fine, right? And if you're right-handed, you know, that clip just falls in your palm, and it's perfectly fine. Back here, same thing, just falls in your palm, doesn't leave any hot spots or anything like that. I can bear down on it, and you'll see my hand turn red, and then it'll just fade away. The clip doesn't, I don't even feel the clip. That's the scales, right? So it is a short knife. I think I've said thin a few times. It's not really thin, it's short. Slender, I could call it. But it isn't like thin this way. It's not thick either, but I think because of how short it is, the thickness doesn't stand out. We can see here it's probably going to be over half an inch, I would guess. Yeah, it's well over half an inch. Wow. Oh, okay. I was like, what? Let me see here. Yeah, 0.53-ish. Up here, it's probably less. Gets a little thicker as you go back. But, you know, that is relatively thick on my scale, but because of the nature of the knife, it's fine, you know. It does have those proud liners, which is part of why it is that thick. I mean, that's 2 extra liners, and then you have basically full thickness scales. So if this was say a frame lock, it would be much thinner. Don't know if that would be better, because then you'd have a frame lock in your way, you know. Would I like to see this in different lock types? For sure I would. I think it'd be cool to see this in a clutch lock. It's funny to think that I'm not really an axis lock guy. It's not my favorite, you know, but button locks lately have not been nearly as good for me, because usually the spring is just not right. And that is one thing on this knife they nailed, is the spring tension is just perfect. It is not too weak. It has a good, strong spring. And that gives me hope on the design I was telling you we're working on, because the spring and the tension and the detent is really my biggest fear with doing a button lock. Because naturally, you know, we design knives with holes. We design knives for reverse flicking. And so I want it to do that well. And just hope that they can dial it close to this, you know. And the thumb stud plays a big part. You know, having a thumb stud placed the way it is here makes it to where the detent feels a little stronger. If there was a hole here, it would probably be a little less of, you know, wouldn't feel as strong. Then again, you couldn't really put a hole in a good spot there. So let's talk about, we talked about cutting. I mean, it is really nice and thin, and because of this choil area and the ergos, it just, man, it just goes through material really well. You got a nice long, slender blade with a good amount of belly, and then you have a nice low sort of sheep's foot tip, but it has that belly in it. So it's just a really interesting blade shape for me. It's not the best utility cutter because of that, because it's so long and it has that belly. The tip kind of comes up. I mean, you can see if I put it on a flat surface, you can see how high that tip is coming up, right? It's not a low tip. Compare that to, since we were looking at the stout earlier, right? The stout blade, the tip is almost at the base there. Oops. This is sticking up substantially more. So with this also being a smaller knife, right? You're talking about 3.5, 3.75 on this guy, 3.25, 3.3. With this, you can just go boom, and you're right at that tip. With this, you go to do that, I got to get up to here to get to that tip because of the belly and the length of the blade. Now, you know, luckily, I don't do all the utility cutting I used to do, so it's not as big of a deal to me as it would have been, say, a year ago. So I can just hold this and cut the cardboard I need to cut, and I'm good to go. I need to get into a box and cut some tape, I'm good to go. I don't need to cut shipping labels with the tip anymore all the time. So that having that low tip isn't as important, and you can do it. But you got a lot of knife here, and it's hard to control utility cuts with a knife like this for me and my hand size. But excellent cutter. Really enjoyed it. The jimping. Let's talk about this jimping. It is not good. And when I say that, I just mean it's kind of non-existent. It's there, but, you know, I'll slide right off of it. It's not really doing much. Like, sure, it's there. But, you know, it's basically feels like jimping on a crown spine situation. Again, let's just see. I think this one has a crown spine with jimping. You know, but here they put a really good divot into the blade, as you can see, and then they put that jimping in there. So if I press down in this jimped area, it really grabs my skin. Where this guy here, I do that, and I'm just sliding it. You know, I'm just sliding along it. So it's just not that good in terms of jimping. Is it fine? Sure, it's there. It's whatever, right? It's just kind of there. But it doesn't provide much in terms of traction, if that matters to you. All right, carry. Carry this in my back left pocket, and I did not have any issues. It was a little bit tight getting over my pants because it has this really thick sort of area here down at the end, which I'd rather have it be a little tight than a little loose, right? So I'm not going to complain about it, but I did have to give it, you know, the old shove, and it popped over that area, and then it was just sitting perfect, and it came out real easy. So I don't have any gripes with the clip, but I do want to mention that. It's not reversible, which is annoying on a knife that is essentially ambidextrous. I mean, I'm left-handed, and, you know, I would argue having the button over on this side is easier, you know. You just push with your index finger, and the blade drops. On this side, you have to push with your thumb and shake it down, and then kind of you re-grip to flick, regrip, you know. With this, I can just click, flick, click. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's similar. But my point is, it's not like way different. I don't have to do anything completely different. Like with a liner lock as a lefty, I have to slide this, get my thumb in the path of the way, slide it close, right? Flick, and then I either turn this way or I do the spin move, twirl it, close it. You know, some people do this move where they push the lock bar across. Again, now you're, you know, asking for trouble, and this knife's really hard to do that with. But right-handed, you just index and get out of the way. Much easier, right? Still have to get in the path of the blade, but neither of these do you have to get in the path of the blade, right? So it's basically an ambidextrous knife is my point. So it should have a reversible clip. So it's kind of a miss there that it doesn't have that. Other than that, you know, nitpicks, the centering, I want it to be perfectly centered and not have blade play and have the really good action. You know, in order to get the really good action dropping, I have to have a little bit of play, and that will also center it up. I would call that a minor gripe, and I didn't mess with it too much. You know, I tried to like push the blade over when tightening. I tried a couple things, but I didn't take the knife apart, put different bearings in or anything. I didn't mess with it enough to say 100% I couldn't center this if I wanted to with it tight. Does it bug me enough? I think if I owned this knife, if I had paid however much this cost, probably 180 bucks, something like that, I would, you know, I'd be a little miffed that I can't get it centered without play. You know, it would bug me a little bit, but it is a button lock, and that's kind of a thing. So, yeah, action / fidget factor. We've talked about this most of the way through here. It's really good. I mean, it fires out really good left-handed with this thumb. I get a really good angle, and it just pops. They did a great job on the spring in here. One of the best, if not the best, button lock thumb stud actuating knife I've tried. I mean, it just really has a good, like, it's actually a stronger feeling detent, which is awesome. I hate soft detents, and this is definitely not that. And you can reverse flick it. Now, I will say it's not because of the detent or the spring tension. It's because of the design. It's not the best reverse flicker. It's just not as comfortable reverse flicking it. Right-handed, I can do it pretty good like that, but it's not as natural as say, oh shit, as say something like this where, you know, I just flick it, don't even think twice and just flick it. On this, you know, I gotta hold it a certain way, get my finger under there, and usually I gotta get it like down at the bottom and then kind of try to aim straight up at the sky with my finger and get it, you know, to flick and stay off the button if I do it left-handed. So it's kind of awkward. I didn't really reverse flick it much left-handed, but right-handed I could do it pretty easy because you don't have to worry about being on the button. If you're on the button, well, what happens? You kind of depress it and then you lose your detent. So it's just a really good thumb flicker and a really good thumb roller, and I enjoy that quite a bit. So and then in closing action, the way I have it, just swings down and it's good to go. So I really like this knife. I think it is a fantastic offering from Kizer. You know, so much so that I wanted to do a dedicated video on it and not just a rapid review. I tend to do that a lot when there's knives that I, you know, just am not that excited about. If you see an actual overview of a knife, it's usually because I like that knife quite a bit. Doesn't make the other ones bad or anything. Just means for me personally, I didn't love it, you know. I really like this knife. So shout out to Munko Knives. Great job with this design. I cannot wait to see what else you do in the future. Also, nice touch right here with this interesting shaped backspacer and the logo right there. Really cool touch. You do have oh, look at here. You have a lanyard area right here. I wonder if it came with the pin and you could install it and it just doesn't come installed. I did not take this knife apart, so it is how it came. That's interesting. I don't know how I didn't notice that till right now. Let's find the box and see what's in there. I think it's this one. Clairvoyant. So you get this box right here. And again, shout out to Kizer. They did provide this. So you get your huge. I'll probably put the here. So here's the extra screws. So you just get screws. You don't get a. We're gonna check in here. Interesting. I think that is a factory mix-up, more so than some kind of thing that they were doing. So it looks like they forgot to put the lanyard pin on this specific knife. Because I don't know why else they would leave that empty. I got to ask some people who have one of these and see if theirs doesn't have the lanyard pin either. So you could put a lanyard on here if you had a lanyard pin. So I don't mind because I don't care. I don't carry lanyards. And I don't think a knife this size really needs one. So could be a last minute decision to just not have one. I don't know. Maybe it was rattling or something. You know, that would bug me way more. So yeah, anyway, there's the Clairvoyant. I'll link it down below at probably Blade HQ will have it. I'm sure some other places will have it as well. Wherever I see it available or coming soon, I will link it. If you use my links, it does help the channel, so I appreciate it. But you obviously don't have to. I love you guys. I really appreciate all your support. Hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will catch you later.